Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a night that almost erased one of America's greatest cities. You've probably heard the name whispered before, the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. But you might not know how close the whole thing came to turning the Midwest into a glowing scar visible from space. You probably won't survive this one, but that's fine, because it's bedtime history and you get to watch from a safe, comfy distance. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on a Chicago street in early October, 1871. The air feels wrong, too dry, too electric. Wooden sidewalks creak beneath your boots, and the smell of dust lingers like a warning. Almost every building around you is made of timber, and the city has baked under weeks of drought. You can taste the dryness in your mouth, a dryness so deep even the river feels thirsty. People say it's just another Sunday night. Church bells have gone quiet, saloons buzz with laughter, and horses clop lazily down DeKoven Street. But above you, the sky hums with something invisible, like the world holding its breath. Chicago in 1871 isn't just a city, it's a dream built too fast. The railroads, the lumber yards, the factories, all packed into a wooden box waiting for a match. And then, somewhere out there in the west side neighborhood of O'Leary's farm, a single spark changes everything. Maybe it's a lantern kicked over, maybe it's lightning, maybe just fate lighting a cigarette. But you see it, a flicker in the barn window. The wind, restless and mischievous, catches the ember like gossip and carries it across the yard. Within minutes, flames climb higher than the rooftops, licking the sky with a hunger that feels almost alive. You move through the narrow alleys as people shout and point. Someone screams for water, someone else just stares, frozen. The fire leaps from shed to fence, from fence to house, and then the first explosion, a kerosene barrel bursting like a cannon, shakes the air. You stumble back as orange light floods the street, swallowing everything it touches. By midnight, the city's fire department is stretched thin. Their horses are exhausted, their hoses barely reaching the heart of the blaze. You can hear the bells of the courthouse tolling, not for the hour, but for alarm. All companies out. Someone yells, but it's already too late. The wind picks up from the southwest, blowing sparks across the river, turning small fires into a single, monstrous inferno. Mainstream historians agree that what made the fire unstoppable wasn't just bad luck, it was the perfect storm of urban design mistakes. Wood everywhere. Tar roofs. Pine sidewalks. Even the fire hydrants, it turns out, were nearly useless because the city's waterworks were failing under pressure. But there's a quirky tidbit people often forget. Some folks that night thought the fire wasn't real. They'd seen smaller blazes before, Chicago had dozens that year, and a few residents actually pulled up chairs to watch the show. One family even brought out lemonade. Minutes later, their entire block was gone. As the heat builds, you notice something strange. The wind doesn't just blow, it roars. It's not the wind you know. It's something alive, swirling with ash and embers, creating what modern scientists call a fire whirl. Witnesses described flaming tornadoes that sucked entire wagons into the air. You duck under a wooden archway as one passes, the sound like a freight train wrapped in thunder. Historians still argue whether it was human error, fate, or divine punishment that set the blaze. In 1871, some preachers called it God's judgment for Chicago's pride. Others blamed capitalism, too much greed, too fast. But you, standing here now, watching sparks dance across the skyline, can only feel awe. Not of punishment, not of sin, but of the sheer, untamable power of fire, how it destroys, how it renews, how it humbles everything that burns. By the time you turn back toward the O'Leary barn, the neighborhood's gone. Just glowing beams and smoke. And yet, the story is only beginning. You walk deeper into the burning west side, where the smell of smoke thickens until it coats your throat. The world is tinted orange, sky, street, faces, all blurred into one glowing fever dream. Somewhere ahead, People shout about a cow, a lantern, and a woman named O'Leary. The tale spreads faster than the flames themselves. You find the small barn on DeCoven Street, or what's left of it. Flames twist from the rafters, wooden walls collapsing in rhythmic sighs. A terrified cow stumbles out, eyes wild, ropes burning off its neck. You can barely hear over the wind, but the gossip is already taking shape. Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern. That one sentence will outlive the fire itself. Catherine O'Leary stands a few feet away, clutching her shawl, shouting that she was in bed when it started. Her husband, Patrick, tries to help the firefighters, but no one listens. They're Irish immigrants, easy targets in a city that already blames them for overcrowding, poverty, and crime. The rumor gives everyone something to hate, someone to name. And as humans often do in chaos, they choose simplicity over truth. The funny part? There's no proof a cow was even inside that barn when it started. The official investigation never confirmed it. The Chicago Republican newspaper printed the cow story the next day, partly as a joke, and then it stuck. For decades, schoolbooks, songs, and even children's rhymes repeated it like gospel. The cow kicked the lantern made the fire burned Chicago. Easy, Kagaram. You walk past the O'Leary property, now just glowing embers. People rush by with buckets of water, shouting for help that won't come. You hear someone mutter that Mrs. O'Leary's milk business must have been cursed. Another man insists it was a comet passing too close to Earth. Yes, really. That fringe theory, born years later, claimed that fragments of Biela's comet ignited Chicago, Peshtigo, and other fires that same night. It's nonsense, but strangely poetic, the heavens themselves setting the earth alight. And yet, in a city desperate for meaning, even wild ideas find roots. You look up at the smoky sky and wonder, what's scarier, a random accident or a universe that might actually be trying to send a message? The flames are louder now, as if laughing at the absurdity of human blame. The O'Learys will carry that burden for the rest of their lives. Catherine retreats into silence. Her name becomes a punchline in newspapers, then in vaudeville acts. It's not until 1997, yes, over a century later, that the Chicago City Council officially clears her name. A symbolic gesture, but one that says, maybe we finally learned to question the easy stories. Historians still argue whether the fire began exactly in the O'Leary barn or a nearby shed. Some point to Daniel "Pegleg" Sullivan, a neighbor who supposedly ran in to save the cows. Others suggest a group of gamblers sneaking cigarettes behind the barn. And there's even a theory that it wasn't one fire at all, that several smaller fires joined forces under the brutal southwest wind. But as you stand here, watching the myth take shape, you realize how quickly stories spread when people are scared. Fire feeds on oxygen, rumors feed on fear. Both are unstoppable once they start. You move away from DeCoven Street, the wooden sidewalks glowing faintly beneath your boots. In the distance, the courthouse bell still tolls. You glance back one last time, the O'Leary house a silhouette against the orange sky. It's strange how history remembers her as a villain, not as a survivor. The city will rebuild. The myth will not. And someday, long after the ashes cool, tourists will visit this spot, reading plaques and wondering how a single cow supposedly changed the course of urban America. But for now, all you hear is the low, endless crackle, the sound of truth being rewritten in firelight. You move through the streets as the flames begin to take command of the city. It's no longer a handful of houses burning. It's the world folding in on itself. The fire breathes, expands, and devours, leaping from block to block with terrifying ease. You can feel the heat pressing against your skin like an open furnace, the air so dry it cuts when you inhale. The night sky is no longer black. It's a heaving, rolling curtain of red and gold, alive with sparks that rise like fireflies gone mad. People shout over the roaring wind, horses scream in panic as carriages overturn. The cobblestones glow faintly beneath the embers. It's beautiful and horrifying, like standing inside a living storm. By now, half the fire department's engines have broken down or run out of water. The pumping stations can't keep up. The main waterworks building itself will soon catch fire. You watch as firefighters, exhausted and soot-covered, try to hold their ground. They form bucket lines that vanish in minutes. The wind shifts again, cruel and sudden, flinging burning shingles across entire streets. Mainstream accounts describe the firestorm as superheated chaos. Scientists later estimate temperatures soared past 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt brass, glass, even sand into liquid. One newspaper reported that the streets themselves were on fire. You watch wooden sidewalks ignite like matchsticks, and buildings burst into flames without even being touched by the original blaze. A man beside you throws his hat to the ground and curses the heavens. Another kneels, crossing himself. And through the noise, the church bells ring again, faint, metallic, then silenced as their towers collapse. You duck behind a stone wall, clutching your sleeve over your mouth, the smoke so thick you can barely see. Somewhere near the river, a wagon bursts into flames and careens through the street, driverless. The horse, still tethered, runs blind through the crowd, scattering people like leaves. Sparks rain down like burning snowflakes, catching on your hair and coat. You slap them away, your hands trembling. And yet, in this chaos, something oddly mesmerizing happens. The fire moves with rhythm. Flicker, roar, silence, then surge again, like the city itself is exhaling in agony. You pass a group of children, barefoot and crying, clutching a small dog between them. A woman leads them away, whispering prayers that vanish into the heat. There's a fringe tidbit that historians sometimes mention. Some residents swore they saw balls of fire floating through the air, great glowing orbs that drifted before bursting against buildings. Today, scientists think it was burning debris swirling in the violent updrafts. But imagine how it looked in 1871, when science hadn't yet caught up and people truly believed the fire had a will of its own. By now, the wooden bridges across the Chicago River are kindling. The flames reach the water's edge, licking at the tar-covered docks. You hear someone shout, "It can't cross the river." A desperate belief clung to by hundreds. After all, fire can't burn water. But you already know what happens next. The wind snaps, changes direction, and carries sparks like a weapon. Tar floats on the river's surface, and in moments, the impossible happens. The river itself ignites. Fire dances across it, turning the last refuge into another trap. Historians still argue whether the river fire truly crossed, or if embers jumped ahead, igniting warehouses on the opposite bank. Either way, the result is the same. The north side of the city bursts into flames. Churches, hotels, mansions, all fall like paper houses. You step back, heart pounding, as a wall of heat pushes you toward the riverbank. Every direction looks the same now. Flame, smoke, chaos. People are no longer trying to fight it, they're just running. A mother carries her baby toward the water. A man drags a piano down the street for no reason he can explain. You realize how quickly civilization dissolves when the elements decide to remind humanity who's in charge. The city that once called itself indestructible is now a single roaring torch, and you, just one small witness, can only watch as the fire takes flight. You follow the fleeing crowds toward the river, that dark ribbon that once promised cool air and trade but now reflects only orange and ruin. The air is heavy, thicker than smoke, thicker than fear. You can feel the heat even here, blocks away from the fire's core. It wraps around you like a fever dream, pressing into your lungs until every breath feels borrowed. Children cry. Horses rear. Wagons overturn and splinter. And yet, amid the chaos, you notice how strange it all feels, almost slow, like time itself has softened around the edges. Each footstep thuds in rhythm with the crackle of wood and the distant collapsing of roofs. The Chicago River, that old, sluggish artery of the city, gleams ahead. Its surface flickers with reflected flame, red and gold rippling like molten metal. Hundreds crowd its banks. Some pray, others shout, others simply stare as if hypnotized. You move closer, brushing shoulders with strangers, shopkeepers, servants, bankers, mothers, all equalized by firelight. Someone yells, "To the bridges!" But the bridges are gone. Burned or broken, twisted skeletons over a boiling river. You can smell tar, oil, and scorched rope. The warehouses along the docks, stacked with lumber and coal, explode one by one, sending geysers of sparks into the night. People start wading into the river, the water black with soot and floating debris. A man tries to push his wife forward. She hesitates, clutching a bag that once held everything she owned. Another family builds a makeshift raft out of barrels and doors. You help lift a child onto it, the wood hissing as the edges touch the water. Mainstream historical records say that thousands took refuge in the river that night. Some spent hours waist-deep, covering their faces with wet blankets to protect from embers. Firefighters joined them too, their hoses useless now that the pumping station was destroyed. By 2 a.m., the city's water mains had run dry, leaving everyone defenseless. You can see it happening. A city reduced to survival instincts. People dunked themselves under again and again just to cool their burning clothes. The wind carries screams and prayers together into one indistinguishable hum. And still, the flames cross. Tar slicks along the water's surface, carrying embers that leap like living creatures. You watch in disbelief as the river itself catches fire, patches of oily flame drifting like angry ghosts. For a heartbeat, it feels like the world has ended. There's a strange comfort, though, in the togetherness of fear. A man beside you, face streaked with soot, begins to hum, something soft, maybe a hymn. Others join. Their voices tremble but don't break. And for a moment, even the fire seems to listen. A lesser-known tidbit whispers through history. As dawn neared, people reported that the fire made sounds, not crackling, not roaring, but voices. Low murmurs in the smoke, as if the city itself were grieving. Later scientists would explain it as infrasound, the subsonic vibration of collapsing structures. But standing here, hearing it yourself, you're not so sure. You drift along the riverbank, watching the glow on the horizon pulse and shimmer. The courthouse dome collapses. Sparks rain down like fiery snow. Across the water, you see people huddled in the mud, clutching each other, their faces ghostly pale in the shifting light. Some have lost everything, homes, family, hope. And yet, they're alive. That counts for something. Historians still argue whether city officials could have stopped it sooner. Some blame the outdated alarm system, others the broken watchman who failed to sound the alert on time. But the truth, like smoke, slips through fingers. Chicago was a wooden fuse waiting for one breath of wind, and tonight, that wind came. You look up one last time before the night gives way to gray dawn. The city skyline, once proud with spires and smokestacks, is gone. What remains are glowing ribs of buildings and the soft hiss of water trying, futilely, to cool a fire too vast to reason with. As you watch the survivors along the river, shivering and silent, one thought surfaces, the kind that sticks to you even as the smoke clears. Sometimes, survival itself is the only victory left. The sun never truly rises that morning. It just bleeds through the smoke, a dim orange disk that could be mistaken for another ember. You stand at the river's edge, soaked to the bone, watching as the world around you shifts from nightmarish motion to eerie stillness. The fire hasn't stopped, but the energy feels different now, slower, heavier, more resigned. You look toward the skyline, or what's left of it. The familiar shapes of the city, the courthouse dome, the tall church spires, the proud hotels, all gone. In their place are skeletal frames, twisted iron, and stone walls that still glow from within. Every gust of wind stirs up clouds of ash that drift like gray snow. It's Monday morning, October 9th, 1871. Chicago isn't burning anymore, it's smoldering. You walk through the haze, shoes crunching on glass and charred debris. The air smells like a mix of rainless dust and sorrow. The fire has consumed nearly everything north of the river, spreading across miles of neighborhoods and parks. Whole districts, business, residential, even government, are erased. A horse skeleton lies in the street beside a melted lamppost. You avert your eyes not because it's grotesque, but because it's still warm. People shuffle past, their faces gray and unreadable. No one speaks much. There's nothing left to say. Mainstream historical accounts record that by dawn, the fire had burned for nearly 30 hours, destroying about 17,000 buildings and leaving over 100,000 people homeless. 1/3 of the city, gone. But the death toll, surprisingly, remains uncertain. Official numbers hover around 300, though historians suspect it was much higher. Many victims were never found, their remains indistinguishable from the ash. You spot a family searching through the ruins of what was once their bakery. The father sifts through blackened pans, the mother quietly arranging broken bits of glass as if putting together a puzzle of memory. The youngest child picks up a lump of melted sugar, sticky and still faintly sweet. Somehow she smiles. That's the part people often forget, how quickly hope begins to take root, even in the ashes. The morning after the Great Fire wasn't just destruction. It was beginning. People shared food, offered blankets, opened their doors, if they had any left. Churches that survived became makeshift shelters. Even the Chicago Tribune managed to print a one-page edition the very next day using borrowed presses in the suburbs. The headline read, "Chicago shall rise again." You turn a corner and find what used to be the water tower, its limestone walls still standing tall amid the ruins. One of the few survivors of the blaze, it looks ghostly now, surrounded by blackened rubble. That tower will one day become a symbol of resilience, but for now, it's just a lonely survivor, much like the people wandering below. A strange detail catches your attention, bits of melted glass fused into the cobblestones. They shimmer faintly, green and blue, like jewels left behind by the fire. A historian later writes that some Chicago children collected them as fire gems, keeping them as lucky charms. It's a small thing, but it feels human, our strange instinct to find beauty in wreckage. And then the debate begins. You overhear men arguing at the edge of the street, city officials, maybe journalists, each trying to assign blame. Someone says the firefighters were too slow. Another says the alarm system failed. A third insists the fire crossed the river by miracle. The conversation grows heated, but you just keep walking. You've seen the truth, and it doesn't need defending. Sometimes, disasters don't have villains, just circumstances. Historians still argue whether the destruction could have been limited if the waterworks hadn't burned. Others suggest that corruption and cost-cutting in city planning made the catastrophe inevitable. Chicago was booming, yes, but also brittle, unprepared for anything that dared test it. You stop near the river again, where survivors are gathering around makeshift fires for warmth. The irony doesn't escape you, tiny, controlled flames now keeping them alive. Children huddle under blankets, eyes wide and hollow, as if they've aged years overnight. Somewhere, a preacher murmurs about redemption. Somewhere else, a man hums softly, his voice echoing through the smoke like a lullaby for the dead. And in that moment, you realize the strangest thing of all. Even as the city lies in ruins, there's no true silence. The sound of rebuilding has already begun. The hammering of willpower, the whisper of human stubbornness. Chicago isn't gone. It's just catching its breath. You keep walking, drifting through a city that no longer knows what it is. The fire has passed, but its ghost lingers in every sound, the crackle of distant timbers collapsing, the faint hiss of cooling stone, the muffled sobs of survivors. Chicago feels like a massive, open wound. Yet, among the pain, small sparks of humanity still flicker. You stop beside a group of men in torn coats, passing a single bucket of water to wash their faces. They were firefighters, you realize, by the singed brass buttons on their uniforms. Their eyes are red from smoke and exhaustion, but they're alive. One of them laughs, a dry, disbelieving sound, and says, "Guess the fire finally ran out a city." The others don't answer, but they smile. Nearby, a boy drags a charred sign out of the rubble. It once read, "Hotel Tremont." He leans it against a rock, dusts his hands, and says, "Still here." A tiny act of defiance. You pass what used to be a market square. The vendors are gone, but a few women sit on crates, handing out food from bundles wrapped in cloth. There's bread, burned on the edges, but no one complains. A man with a bandaged arm pours water for strangers. Everyone is someone's neighbor now. It's strange, disasters have a way of equalizing people. The rich who once dined in mansions now share soup with laborers. Bankers, servants, dockworkers, all lined up together, faces smeared with the same soot. Chicago has become a city of equals, if only for a few days. Mainstream accounts tell stories of heroism here. Firefighters who refused to abandon their stations until they physically collapsed. Priests who ran back into burning churches to save parish records. Even ordinary people who risked their lives for strangers. One woman, a widow named Hattie Conant, reportedly led over 50 people to safety through the flames, guiding them with a soaked blanket and sheer determination. But there were other stories too, the ones whispered, not printed. Looters prowling through the ruins, stealing jewelry, watches, even furniture. Some were shot by the police, others vanished into the smoke. Soldiers were called in from nearby forts to restore order, and martial law was declared for 3 days. You can still see them, Union veterans, rifles slung over their shoulders, standing guard among the ashes. You approach one of them. His face is tired, his boots caked with soot. "We fought to keep a country together," he mutters, "and now we fight to keep a city from eating itself." There's no anger in his voice, just a hollow weariness that feels older than the war itself. A fringe tidbit says that amid the looting, some thieves accidentally saved lives. Breaking into stores for supplies, they stumbled upon trapped families, pulling them free before the walls collapsed. Morality blurs when survival is the only rule left. You wander toward the lakefront. The air is cooler here, heavy with steam rising from the scorched sand. People sit in silence, wrapped in blankets, staring at what used to be their home. The lake glows faintly with reflected firelight, red fading to pink, then gray. You dip your hand into the water. Swarm. The fire has heated even the shore. Historians still argue whether Chicago's spirit was broken that night or reforged. Some say the fire destroyed the arrogance of a city growing too fast. Others insist it ignited its true character, a relentless refusal to stay down. You can sense both sides in the survivors' faces. Grief and grit, side by side. As evening approaches, small campfires appear across the parklands. People cook whatever they've scavenged, potatoes, bread, a bit of salted meat. You sit beside one, watching sparks rise into the smoky dusk. Someone starts playing a fiddle, off-key, but sincere. Children dance barefoot on the ash-covered grass. The sound feels impossibly alive. In a way, it's the most human moment you've seen yet. The city has burned to the ground, but somehow, its people are making music. You lean back, eyes half closed, letting the warmth of the fire touch your face. For the first time since the blaze began, you can almost feel peace. Not because it's over, but because life has refused to stop. The fire may have taken the city, but tonight, the people of Chicago reclaim the night. With smoke in their lungs, ashes on their hands, and a quiet song rising toward the stars that the fire couldn't reach. Morning stretches across Chicago like a slow yawn, carrying with it the sharp tang of smoke and the soft, lingering warmth of embers. You trudge through the streets, now half hidden beneath gray ash that crunches beneath your boots, each step a reminder of what was lost. The firestorm has passed, leaving behind a city stripped to its bones, but it has also sparked something new, a beginning that no one saw coming in the heat of the inferno. The first rays of sun catch on blackened walls, illuminating warped and cracked bricks, twisted iron beams, and shattered glass that glitters like tiny memories. You follow a group of men carrying salvaged furniture, tables, chairs, even an old piano, toward open lots. They arrange what they can in the middle of the street, creating temporary homes. The smell of burning wood still lingers, but so does the faint aroma of coffee and cooking fires. Life, stubborn as a weed, is poking through the ruins. Business owners have started moving quickly. Lumber yards are already being cleared of debris. Shopkeepers gather in small groups, trading not only supplies but news. Someone mentions a Chicago Tribune reporter who climbed a surviving water tower to sketch the destruction, a panoramic record that would later become one of the most famous images of the fire. You follow the crowds and see remnants of buildings that once held schools, bakeries, and offices. Some walls lean precariously, others stand upright, determined to survive. Historians still debate whether the rapid rebuilding was driven more by necessity or ambition. Some argue that Chicago's commerce demanded immediate restoration. Others insist that a collective human defiance, sheer will, kept the city from surrendering to despair. Either way, you can feel it in the air. Chicago refuses to remain buried in ash. A quirky tidbit emerges as you walk past a group of children examining twisted shards of metal and glass. Some of the children find melted bottles that formed into shapes resembling animals, houses, and even faces. They call them fire toys, pocketing them as treasures. Amid the devastation, imagination refuses to die. Volunteers arrive from neighboring towns, bringing supplies and manpower. Teams form spontaneously, some clear rubble, others tend to the injured or bring food and water. Fires are still smoldering, but buckets of water, makeshift ditches, and alert neighbors begin containing them. You notice a group of women rebuilding a bakery. Their determination is infectious, and even a few men who had previously been wandering aimlessly start lending a hand. The city's leadership faces a daunting challenge. Zoning, street planning, and infrastructure must be reconsidered from scratch. Some areas will be widened to prevent future fire spread, others rebuilt entirely with brick and stone. You watch architects and engineers surveying the rubble, sketching tentative plans on scraps of paper. Chicago isn't just being rebuilt, it's being reimagined. A mainstream fact emerges as you pause. Within a single year, over 8,000 new buildings would be erected. It's staggering, almost unbelievable, especially when you remember that most of the city was burned to the ground. Brick, stone, and fireproof materials become the new standard. Wooden sidewalks are replaced, and city ordinances are rewritten to prevent another disaster. Even amidst the scholarly debates about how Chicago could have done more to prevent the fire, one thing is undeniable. The city's residents start to bond in unprecedented ways. Former rivals, neighbors who barely spoke, strangers who once ignored each other, they now work side by side, hands blistered and faces streaked with ash, forging a community stronger than the fire could ever destroy. You pause near a rebuilt street corner, looking at scaffolding rising above freshly poured bricks. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughs, chasing another who is balancing on a fallen beam. The sound seems almost impossible in this ghost city, but it persists. You realize that the process of rebuilding is not just physical, it's emotional, symbolic, and defiant. Chicago will rise from this night of fire, stronger, braver, and wiser. And you, standing among the first stirrings of recovery, feel the heartbeat of a city refusing to yield. You walk further into the heart of the recovering city, noticing how the ruins are slowly being transformed into blueprints for something bigger, bolder, and utterly new. Architects stride through the rubble, measuring walls with precise fingers, sketching ideas in notebooks smudged with ash. You realize Chicago is not just being rebuilt, it is being reinvented. The streets are wider now, some still lined with blackened timbers, others cleared entirely. Fire-resistant brick and limestone are replacing wood at a remarkable pace. In one corner, you see a mason laying bricks meticulously, each one a statement. We will not burn again. Above him, scaffolds rise like skeletons of a future city, hinting at towers taller than anyone could have imagined before the fire. The Great Fire may have leveled much of the city, but it also created an unusual opportunity for urban planning. City officials and engineers debate how best to prevent another catastrophe. Streets are widened, alleys rerouted, and water mains upgraded. Open squares are designated as fire breaks, and public fountains are installed to aid firefighting. You hear one city planner mutter to a colleague, "We're drawing a city that can breathe, not one that smolders." A quirky historical note catches your attention. Some early rebuilding efforts included fireproof sidewalks made of concrete, but locals complained they were too slippery. Children slipped and slid, laughing through ash-streaked faces, while adults grumbled at the modern nonsense. Even as Chicago embraced innovation, human behavior remained unpredictable. You stroll past construction sites where immigrant workers, Germans, Irish, and Scandinavians, labor shoulder to shoulder with native Chicagoans. The fire has erased class lines momentarily, everyone's contribution matters. One foreman directs a team lifting heavy beams while an architect sketches new skyscraper designs in pencils so faint that you almost miss them. The seeds of what will become the Chicago School of Architecture are quietly being planted among these ashes. Mainstream historians note that the city's rapid rebuilding, thousands of buildings in just a few years, also attracted speculators and financiers. Wealthy investors saw the fire not only as a tragedy but as a business opportunity. Skyscrapers, department stores, and luxurious hotels would rise where wooden houses once stood. Chicago was transforming from a working-class lumber hub into a bustling metropolis with ambition in every brick. You pause near Michigan Avenue, where the foundations of a grand hotel are already laid. Dust and ash swirl around you, softening your vision, turning the scene almost dreamlike. It's difficult to imagine this place was once a roaring inferno. Yet the flame's memory lingers in the charred stones, whispering a reminder of resilience. Historians still debate whether the Great Fire's aftermath ultimately accelerated Chicago's growth. Some argue it was a catalyst, forcing innovation and planning that would otherwise have taken decades. Others suggest that if the fire had never occurred, the city might have grown more organically, albeit more slowly. Either way, standing among these early constructions, you sense that a new Chicago is being born, not just rebuilt, but redesigned. A few children dash past you, kicking up dust as they play in empty lots. Their laughter echoes strangely against the skeletal frames of buildings, a tiny rebellion against the destruction around them. You can't help but smile at the absurdity of life continuing in the shadow of tragedy. By midday, the city feels alive again, not the same city, but one infused with hope, imagination, and determination. Brick by brick, street by street, the fire's ashes are being transformed into foundations for the future. The skyline you see here, while incomplete, hints at the immense possibilities that lie ahead. Chicago's heart is still beating, stronger and more determined than ever. And as you walk past the building frames and scaffolds, you can almost hear the city whisper, "We will rise and we will endure." You wander through the streets as the city takes shape, but your mind keeps drifting back to the myths that clung to the fire like smoke. Everyone wants a story to make sense of chaos, and Chicago, with its immense loss, became fertile ground for legends. You see the remnants of the O'Leary barn and remember the cow that supposedly started it all. People still point, still tell the story as if repeating it might exorcise the fire itself. You stop at a corner where a group of children listen, wide-eyed, to an older man recounting the infamous tale. "The cow kicked the lantern, you see," he says, voice dramatic, "and that's how the fire began." Some kids giggle. Some stare in disbelief. You wonder how a single image, the scapegoated cow, can endure across decades, when the truth is far messier, more complicated. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some folks even claimed that the O'Leary cow returned as a ghostly figure, wandering the outskirts of the city during lightning storms. Tourists and locals alike would swear they saw a large shadow moving across the fields near the old DeKoven property. Clearly, fear and fascination breed creativity in equal measure. But myths didn't stop with the cow. Stories proliferated about mysterious fire starters, ranging from arsonists seeking revenge to meteorites streaking from the sky. Some fringe theories claimed that foreign saboteurs conspired to destroy Chicago for economic gain. Each tale had a kernel of plausibility, yet none could truly capture the randomness of the blaze. You wander past a burned church where a signboard reads, "Pray for Chicago." Someone whispers about a priest who tried to save parish records, but the building collapsed. Another story tells of looters who, ironically, saved a trapped family while rifling through rubble. Each tale blurs heroism, misfortune, and human frailty, creating a patchwork of memory that is both factual and fantastical. Historians still argue whether these legends obscure the real lessons of the fire. Some insist that blaming a cow, lightning, or saboteurs distracts from systemic failures, wooden construction, inadequate water infrastructure, and the city's rapid, unplanned growth. Others believe myths are essential, giving people a narrative to process trauma. Either way, myths have a life of their own, as enduring as brick or stone. You notice a street musician strumming a violin near a temporary wooden stand, playing a melody that sounds like the wail of fire itself. Passers-by nod respectfully, acknowledging both the loss and the persistence of the human spirit. Music, stories, legends, they all coexist here, woven into the recovering city. The more you walk, the more you realize Chicago's identity is inseparable from these tales. Even false ones leave marks. They shape culture, influence decisions, and become shorthand for resilience. In classrooms, children will learn about Mrs. O'Leary's cow. In books, authors will debate the comet theory. On tour, guides will point and recount stories that blur history and imagination. And yet, as you trace the streets, you notice something remarkable. The myths, while powerful, do not erase truth. Bricks are being laid, schools are being rebuilt, and families are returning. Life continues. The city does not collapse under rumor, nor does it crumble beneath legend. Chicago rises, carrying both memory and myth in its heart. By evening, the glow from construction fires mirrors the distant memory of the blaze. Shadows flicker against half-built structures. You pause and reflect on the strange balance between fact and folklore, how fire consumes, yet storytelling preserves. Even as myths live on, they illuminate resilience rather than erase it. You step into a quieter part of the city, where the streets are still scarred, but conversations are softer, reflective. Amid the rebuilding, scholars, city planners, and journalists debate endlessly about the Great Fire's causes and consequences. You overhear heated discussions that blur fact, interpretation, and conjecture, reminding you how humans cling to understanding in the face of catastrophe. Some argue that the fire began in the O'Leary barn. Others insist it started in a nearby stable or even in multiple small fires across the city that merged under the relentless southwest wind. We may never know for sure, one historian mutters. The evidence is scattered, and human memory is unreliable. You nod silently, recognizing that the truth is slippery, a ghost among the ruins. The debate continues beyond the fire's origin. You overhear someone claim that corruption in city planning contributed significantly. Wooden sidewalks, narrow streets, inadequate water mains, all highlighted as preventable weaknesses. Another scholar counters, saying the city's rapid growth outpaced any reasonable safety measures. Chicago's ambition itself was a catalyst. A fringe theory makes its way into the conversation, that fragments of Biela's comet, passing close to Earth that October, ignited several simultaneous fires in the Midwest, including Peshtigo, Wisconsin. Scientists today dismiss it, of course, but the story captures the imagination, suggesting cosmic mischief in the destruction of an entire city. You can't help smiling at humanity's desire to assign cosmic reasoning to urban catastrophe. Historians still argue whether the rebuilding process favored the wealthy over the working class. Brick and stone replaced timber, but only in certain districts. Some neighborhoods were prioritized for commercial reconstruction. Others were left for residents to rebuild themselves. You walk past temporary shelters where families still sleep on cots, and you understand why debates about fairness are still heated. And yet, amidst the scholarly bickering, you notice a remarkable phenomenon. Resilience thrives. Schools are being restored, new fireproof buildings rise, and residents volunteer tirelessly. The debates, while intense, underscore that Chicago's story is more than myth or error. It is a testament to human determination. You pause by a half-finished bridge. Engineers argue over its design. Architects sketch towers that will eventually pierce the skyline, and historians note how quickly lessons from the fire are integrated into urban planning. Chicago is learning from its trauma, building not just for today but for decades to come. You hear someone quote a popular sentiment of the time: Chicago is a city that cannot die. It's part bravado, part truth. The fire may have leveled blocks and erased streets, but it cannot extinguish the ingenuity, grit, and spirit of its inhabitants. Standing there, you realize why scholars, journalists, and ordinary citizens will continue to argue over the fire for generations. Every new discovery, every reconstructed block, every anecdote feeds the conversation. The Great Chicago Fire is more than an event. It is a lens through which humans examine mortality, urban growth, resilience, and the delicate line between myth and reality. And you, quietly observing, recognize that understanding the fire fully may be impossible, and that's part of its enduring power. You step into present-day Chicago, the modern skyline stretching overhead, glass and steel replacing timber and ash. The streets hum with cars, bicycles, and chatter, yet the memory of the Great Fire lingers in the city's very foundations. You follow the subtle cues of history. A commemorative plaque here, a preserved water tower there, reminders that the past is never fully gone. Walking along Michigan Avenue, you pause to imagine the 1871 cityscape, the wooden sidewalks, tar-coated roofs, and bustling streets transformed overnight into infernos. It's almost impossible to reconcile the gentle rhythm of today's traffic with the chaos that once engulfed this place. Yet, as you step on polished stones where charred rubble once lay, you can sense the echoes of that fire, faint but insistent. Visitors stop to snap photos of the old water tower, perhaps unaware that it survived as one of the few standing relics from that catastrophic night. You linger by the footprint of the Chicago fire, now a small plaza, and hear whispers of history carried on the wind. People stroll, laugh, and enjoy cafes, oblivious to how close the city came to erasure. Mainstream historians often note that memory shapes Chicago's identity as much as the fire itself. The blaze destroyed, yes, but it also inspired. From architectural innovation to urban planning, the city transformed tragedy into opportunity. You watch young professionals and families alike moving through these streets, a living testament to lessons hard-learned in 1871. Yet, the myths persist. Tourists ask about Mrs. O'Leary's cow, photographers frame the old water tower, and storytellers whisper of flaming tornadoes and ghostly embers. A fringe detail you overhear mentions the fire gems children collected after the blaze, small pieces of melted glass they kept as lucky charms. Odd, whimsical, human. These legends intertwine with fact, coloring perception without erasing reality. Historians still argue about the fire's precise origin and impact, debating waterworks, urban planning, and even the role of cosmic events like Biela's comet. But standing here, you see that debate is secondary to the larger narrative: survival, adaptation, and resilience. Chicago endured because people refused to surrender, because communities banded together, and because myths, both cautionary and fanciful, kept memory alive. You drift along the Riverwalk, noticing how bridges arch gracefully over calm waters that once reflected flames. Parks now offer green solace, a stark contrast to the smoky chaos of the past. As you pause by a fountain, you realize that every brick and beam tells a story of reconstruction, ingenuity, and hope. The city hums with life, yet the lessons of that fateful October night remain embedded in its rhythm. Chicago doesn't forget. The fire shaped not only its architecture and streets but its character, instilling resilience that continues to define its spirit. As the sun sets, casting long shadows over the buildings, you feel a quiet connection to those who lived through the inferno. Their courage, fear, and persistence resonate still, carried forward in each brick, each street, and each heartbeat of the city that refused to die. You settle onto a bench overlooking the calm river, feeling the gentle hum of the city at dusk. The heat, the smoke, the chaos of that fateful night have softened into memory, almost dreamlike, like smoke drifting upward and fading into the sky. You breathe slowly, letting the quiet wash over you, letting the rhythm of Chicago's present soothe the echoes of the past. The river glitters faintly, catching the last warm rays of sunset. Children's laughter carries across open plazas, blending with the soft hum of conversation and the occasional clatter of distant construction. Somewhere, a violin plays a gentle tune, notes stretching lazily through the evening air. You close your eyes briefly, imagining the crackle of fire replaced by the whisper of wind and flowing water. You reflect on the city's resilience, on how myths and truths intertwine like threads in a tapestry. The cow that never started the fire, the sparks that leapt across streets, the heroes and ordinary citizens who endured, every memory settles quietly now, part of a living narrative. The chaos of flames has given way to calm, and the city breathes, carrying forward lessons learned in heat and hardship. The air is soft, warm against your skin, carrying the faint scent of flowers from a nearby garden. You stretch your legs, noticing how far Chicago has come, from burning inferno to thriving metropolis, from fear to courage, from myth to enduring story. The echoes of history linger, but they are gentle now, whispering reassurance rather than alarm. As twilight deepens, you let your mind drift. The city's heartbeat slows, its lessons nestling in your consciousness. Smoke has faded. Flames are gone. Only memory, resilience, and quiet strength remain, wrapping around you like a blanket. You take a final deep breath, exhale slowly, and allow sleep to approach, carried on the soft, steady rhythm of history itself.